make prosthetics and we distribute worldwide as well. Heavily involved with elite athletes, as Penny said, also from athletes from the ground up. It's not just about being at the Paralympics, it can be from anything to that to competitive dad level. So what I've been asked to talk to you today about is alignment issues, where to start, where to begin, what to look out for, some socket stuff, some interface stuff. And as it's a small group, any questions please just shout out, it's absolutely fine. So, where to begin? So what hopefully, at the end of the day, or end of my talk anyway, you'll have a bit more knowledge about how to assemble running legs, how to put them together, a good place to begin, what you're looking for when someone uses them, and how to optimise what people have at the same time. Important thing to remember is giving someone a running or sport prosthesis doesn't make them into an athlete. There's lots of things you have to look out for as well. What their goals are, what your goals are for them, how you think they're going to achieve them. And in that you have to make sure you can do the best you do with prosthetics, as we always do. Make sure you have the appropriate components as well. Not going to run all this favourite part. Main thing where everything begins is socket. Without a comfortable socket, it will never be very good for your patient, and they'll find that they're quite uncomfortable and they won't use it as they intend to do. So when your patient comes to you, we look for all these things. What sort of leg do they have? What sort of suspension can we use? What sort of tissue do they have? All those sort of things can start from where we begin with what sort of sockets that we make, what components we have. Things to remember about sport or high impact activities, whether it's just running through a bus or jumping from a step, is that the load on the socket can increase up to 3 times body weight in just a matter of seconds. So a comfortable socket that's good for walking may not be so when you start jumping around on it. Increased peak pressures and shear forces are the bane of an amputee's life, I guess. Once you've caused a sore, they can't wear the socket anymore, so it's uncomfortable. So socket fit is also quite important in terms of proprioception, being able to control the leg that they have beneath. For sockets, we have a bit of transtibial sockets here. Don't be afraid to go back to P-line. Oscar Pistorius, as you all know, he runs on socks and P-line lining. So he doesn't use anything special, he just likes to use that because socks soak up sweat. He's comfortable on his P-line. He's tried pretty much every single thing we can make him, and he's always gone back to P-line. So don't be afraid to go back to basics. Flexible inners can be quite important. They certainly soften up trim lines, which is quite important on high activities with lots of knee flexion, for example. Tend to use laminated sockets for high activity, one because they look cool. Let's become an example there. And the other because they're a bit lighter and a bit thinner, and a lot of them also be a bit stronger as well. Trim lines, even though they have a good, well-made socket, comfortable socket, trim lines are important too. If it's a specialist limb for sport, you can play around them to your heart's content. If it's a walking and everyday limb for sport, you have to be a bit more careful because ultra trim lines can change quite a lot of things. Tend to find for higher impact sports you have them lower than you normally would, so it gives room for hamstrings, etc., and a bit of muscle expansion as well. Just to make sure you maximise the range of motion. Preferred method, if you look at anything on TV, people running around, preferred method for transtibials is cushion liner and a sleeve. Reason is it's the largest surface area for suspension, and you also get secondary suspension from the sleeve as well. So that's the most common element. But there's also lots of other things around as well. Things to remember with sleeves is it can restrict your range of motion a little. Durability can be an issue sometimes if it involves a sport that's kneeling down or jumping around, catching the sleeve on things. And comfort around the top edge can be an important part as well.
This sleeve liner, I mean, does that include a pin? Or
No,
everything?
as I said, Oscar uses P-line socks. Even just a simple silicone sheath and socks over the top people use as well. And don't be afraid of a cuff strap and waist belt. If it works for the guy, it's good. Here we have someone, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he runs around with a waist belt, fully visible on the outside of his lycra. So whatever works for the patient is what you should go. So one of the most important things with sport and activity is, especially with our products, is category selection. Simple to do. Get your patient weight plus their impact level. In this case, it will just be high equals flex foot category. And although it sounds simple, probably one of the easiest things to get wrong. And the thing to do is actually weigh your patient. They don't need to lie to you, but they always invariably will. I still think I weigh the same as I did when I was 14. However, it's not true. So make sure you weigh them and get an accurate weight. And then impact level, we have 4 with our stuff. Sport is what applies to sport level. Only applies to sport feet. High also applies to active feet, which you can do sport on. But sport will only apply to our actual sport feet. So for those wondering how our feet are made, just as an interlude, we make all our feet in Iceland. This is where they're made. So to make them, we lay them up on these slabs, and it's a wet layout, and they're then cured in an autoclave for about an hour, about 120 degrees. When the feet come out, they're hard and stiff. And then depending which category it is, depends how thick the carton is, depends which foot we're making, depends what shape it is. And we actually cut our feet out with water jets rather than a saw. So we don't use the saw, the saw incorporates errors into the actual product. None of you can leave. So this is all done computer controlled, so everything we make is exactly the same. There's actually water with kind of a grit in it, so it's not just water. But even drills the holes and bolts as well, so everything is incredibly accurate that we have here. And then to finish the feet off, we have Bob the robot that snaps them out of the mould and then polishes them on a bubbling wheel. And the reason we do this is one, health and safety. You don't have a guy stood there with a face mask on. Cameraman gets extracted by so health and safety, and also everything's exactly the same. So if you have a 1 foot one day and you order the same again, we can make sure it's exactly the same. Loving me pasting the box. And category-wise, most of our feet have, depending which foot it is, up to 9 categories, and this is our category testing machine. So every foot that comes off the production line is category tested. And even though we just have categories 1 to 9, we also have points per category as well. So we have 1.1, 1.2, etc., etc. For sports feet especially, in our running feet we have highs and lows, so we have 18 categories of running feet. But if you have a cheater category 5.2, and you want to replace it with a 5.2, we can make sure it's a 5.2. It just means that your amputee sporting person or someone wants to run always gets exactly the same thing. Okay.
Ollie,
hello?
If you've got 18 different categories,
yes.
How do you determine, if you've got a patient in front of you, how do you determine whether they're having a 1.1 or 1.2?
Right, so in terms of points of a category, that only dictates whether it's high or low. So in flex runs, we have categories 1 to 9. If the patient's at the top of a category 6, there'll be a 6 high. If it's at the bottom of a category 6, there'll be a 6 low. So that's what you'd order. You then get, so a 6 low would maybe be a 6.1. So you fit a 6.1 and it's fine. If it comes down the line you want to replace it with a 6 low, you order another one. But that could be a 6.1 or a 6.2. But if you let us know it's a 6.1, you'll get exactly the same thing again.
But how would the prosthetist know that it's a 6.1 that they...
It says on the label on the foot.
No, for the individual, how does the prosthetist determine which...
Oh, which high or low would they be, you mean?
Or which category?
Oh, just weigh them.
So it's just on weight?
Just on weight. The impact level for sports feet is always high, it's always sport category. So you just weigh your patient and where they sit in that category is what you order. We have a chart coming up in a minute that hopefully will explain it. So to start off with cheetah feet, all well known because of Mr. Pistorius here, who, fingers crossed, might be in the able-bodied Olympics in the 400 metres. That's what he's training for now. We saw him in the Paralympic Games last 2 weeks Tuesday. He won the 200 metres, but only because 400 metres wasn't an event in that particular competition. So this is kind of the first choice you look at. Someone wants to sprint or someone wants to jump. We have different feet for different activities, so this is what that foot relates to. You can see I've got some demo stuff I should pass around as I speak. So we'll start here. So you can see the way it looks like a letter J, and that's kind of the main thing all our feet are based on, is it's a J-shaped foot. And the way that the carbon's laid up and the shape of the foot itself means it releases a lot of energy at once, which is why it's good for sprinting. If you try and jog on the foot, all it does is make you run too fast, and before you realise that you sprinted 5 kilometres. Also used for jumping. We'll come to jumping in a minute. So historically, before I guess sport hit the limelight, we used to have 2 models of cheetah, mould A and a mould B. And the main difference was the amount of flexion used to get in the actual pylon itself. But from a few years of using cheetahs, fitting on different patients, it then became apparent that mould B pretty much suited everyone. And from 2009, that shape's been the one that was used for everybody. You still get mould A if you want to, but we haven't found anyone that would need it. Which just shows the difference between an A and a B. You can see the different flexion in the pylon.
So, Ollie, I wasn't sure about that. Are you saying that all J-shaped feet are only suitable for sprinting? Or are you saying there's different modules?
Different modules.
Yeah. And not all of them are suitable for long distance?
So we have low activity feet that are still based on the J shape
Yeah.
that you'd use for a kind of diabetic vascular patient that you wouldn't sprint.
Yeah.
With feet, length of limb does play a part in how you set it up. We have different connectors for this sort of foot. For a long limb, we tend to recommend bolting it onto the back. So you putty the adapter on. We'll go through how to try it in a minute. But for shorter limbs, to get the right height, we have a pylon connector that you attach, and then it comes off the bottom of the socket, and that's what you drill onto the actual foot itself. Alignment-wise, with all these things, there's a starting point where we suggest that you begin from. Where you often end up isn't this, but it's a good place to begin. And if you start here and you get all confused and it's going worse and worse, at least you can come back to the same point. So as a recommendation, whether it's long or short, divide the foot into half and then make sure that's where your weight line drops down. So it's quite a simple starting point. More often than not, patients want to be more over the toe, and it's better to do that than a bit farther back. If you set up a patient with the weight line a bit far back, they find that when they run, they go straight up in the air and backwards, which isn't ideal. So just make sure they're more on the toe. Can you see there? Laser line, probably the most useful aspect of the tools you can have for alignment, or failing that, a bit of string with a weight on it. From experience, we have found that a longer limb, you may need a slightly stiffer category, and you may need to place the socket a bit further forward over the toe. And for a shorter limb, you may need a softer category of foot. Reason is, it's an element of control. If you have a patient with a short limb, they have a very small surface area, and they sometimes find that these feet tend to make their knee a bit uncontrollable. But with a softer category, they can control it a lot better. So just bear that in mind. Often, because of the amount of compression you get in his feet, unless you're very strong, you won't be able to bend it, I'm afraid.
That's worth a try.
Yeah. Setting these legs up, often set up longer than your standard prosthesis, which is set up to your exact height. The reason for this is the amount of compression you get in the feet. So with the cheetah, you want it at least 25 millimeters longer than the sounder. So when you're stood on it, you have your knee slightly flexed, or you're on tiptoes to get your knees straight. For a medium to short limb, just divide the socket in half and divide the foot in half. For a longer limb, just plant and flex the foot slightly so the weight line comes a bit further forward towards the toe. And you can do this on trialing it. So here's a good way to trial it. Giant hose clips. Attach it back in a socket, glue them up tight. It's good enough to at least stand on, check the alignment before you start to drill and bolt it.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt again.
Right.
With the longer leg, do you not find there's a problem with toe catch as they're running?
Not so much. No, I don't think so. It depends on other things as well, alignment and strength and how the patient runs on it. Well, you found that yourself.
Yeah.
What you tend to find with the, do you mean with a longer cheetah or do you mean with a longer limb?
Longer cheetah, yeah.
What you tend to find is because you get so much energy return from it, you get propelled more up into the air, so the actual space for swinging your leg through is greater. So if you're on your right foot, so say your right foot's a cheetah, and you bounce up on that, you go so much further up in the air that toe catching doesn't seem to be an issue.
Do you set them up on a fitting kit, Ollie, rather than determining your height straight on? I mean, surely when you drill and bolt it, that's it.
That's it,
You
absolutely.
make the decision.
Yeah. So this is, for example, this would be a check socket, and you get some cotton epoxy and just stick the foot to the back of the socket. Then what you wrap around there is like a Scotch cast, the blue glass fibre tape, just for trial. And the trouble with these is there's no ideal starting point other than a bit longer and in the middle of the socket.
Yeah.
And then you just need to find somewhere to start. And until you've got them up and bouncing, running around the neck, there's nowhere to begin really. So this is just a good place to start. So just make sure it's 25mm longer. Your abduction level looks about right and your alignment's where you want it, and that's normally not a bad place to begin. So for starting off from frontal plane, it's never a bad idea to outset the foot slightly as well, because more often than not you find people have a bit of lateral thrust, which means that you need to get that to the side of it. So just offsetting that means it tends to combat that. 5 to 7 degrees to 7 degrees external rotation, because when you run you tend to get some internal rotation from your hip and your knee. And then we use adhesive putty, so it's just a 2-part putty you just mix up and it sets in about 20 minutes and you can bond the foot quite strongly with that. And then cast tape and hose clamps for reinforcement. Just as an example of the amount of internal and external rotation you need, this is Oscar from last weekend. This is Rich White in the background, you can see Oscar 1. So this is Oscar's socket, and if you just drop a line down the front, you can see how much external rotation his cheetah has compared to his alignment. And you probably wouldn't pick that from the start, you wouldn't get that from the initial alignment. That's where you need somewhere to begin, and then this is where you tend to end up.
How long do you spend generally on alignment and setting it up?
The best thing to do, when we go to do this, we tend to, it probably takes about an hour or 2 hours to get it pretty close. And then even after that, we tend not to drill and bolt it and just synthetic tape it on a set to a running track for a week or two.
Yeah.
Because more often than not, they'll come back and say it's good, but once you've attached it, that's it. So,
I mean, that's prosthetics, you just never want to make that
exactly.
final call until
Exactly
that's
that.
certain.
So yeah, it does take some time to set these things up, but it is important to get it correct, because if it's not correct, either they won't use it, or they'll make it slower, or they'll just get fed up with the whole thing.
Is that a window you've got cut out at the front of the socket?
Oscar's congenital. So he, in fact, this picture at the front was a very young Oscar. So Oscar's congenital, so he just has his windows cut out in the socket. So that's Oscar circa about when he's 15. So you can see his congenital legs, but he's kind of invariant. But yeah, windows, so he just straps himself in with socks. And obviously, everyone has different stuff. If you ever seen sprinters at the start line, there is a guy that had a little tiny vacuum pump that just before gets set go is evacuating the last piece of air out of his socket, and that tends to last him for 12 seconds. It means in order to so people do different things. That's just a window with some Velcro straps. And if you ever see Oscar's legs, you'd think they'd be nicer than they were. There's like bits of bolts and wedges made out of cereal packets and stuff in the back. So this is what I was talking about, the putty. So you can just putty the adapter on. So that you can either do it 2 ways. You can either putty the adapter on, drill and bolt your foot, and then you can just move the adapter up and down on the socket. Or you can just attach the foot to the back of the socket and then just use that.
I think it comes off pretty easily.
Just whack it on the bench, just fine, this is what you can do. So if you have drilled and cut it, and the height's right, but the alignment's not, you can still use wedges with the bolted version. So you get different wedges. You can turn them sideways to get toe in and toe out. You can change socket flexion and extension, and you can change toe in and toe out as well. So don't be put off once you have made it, but just try and get it as close as you can, and then when they come back, you'll be fine-tuning the wedges anyway. Attaching cleats to the bottom of the foot. Different ways of doing this. One is you can just slice the running shoe in half, roughen up the bottom and bond it on. Another way is you can leave the front on the foot and then stick it on and tie the laces up. So there's different ways of doing this. You tend to find people that are a bit dubious about you slicing their 70-pound shoe in half, but it's the only thing we have. With our lower activity running foot, we have a replaceable sole now, but that is coming for cheetah, but not yet. And you can just tape it on as well if you need. Best thing you can do is go to a track and run with the thing, and then make sure you have a good video camera or video tape so you can see how well this slide is. Nowadays you just get a nice, you can do it on your iPhone in fact, or similar smartphones are available. You can just tape with that and then you can analyse what people are doing. It's amazing what you can see in slow motion. So even this is Marlon Shirley. He's a sprinter in America. So what you're looking for here is even arm swing. Pelvis is level. You want to make sure his shoulders are level so it doesn't look like he's dropping into a hole every step. Make sure he has full knee flexion extension, which you'll see from the cervical plane. And just check his stride length as well. Just check that's even. So if this was in slow motion, you'd be able to see a lot more. However, this was on videotape. Sagittal plane, different guy. So you can see once it goes into slow motion, it's a lot more obvious what you're seeing.
Do you ever use treadmills at all, or?
No. The reason is they're quite a narrow base of running, so people run with that and they think, yeah, it's great, and they go to a track, and as soon as they start to run on the track, it's completely different. You can use it for like initial setup, but the best thing to do is just take it for a running track.
I just wondered at that initial stage, would it be useful?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. If you have one available, it's good. Do you need a treadmill, actually?
Sorry?
Do you need a treadmill?
We've got one.
Okay. Good. There's also all sorts of like basic gait analysis software you can get as well. It's not expensive, where you can just slow people down and you can just pause it and you can draw alignment lines of where they are. It does show a lot. So for this guy, we can see stride length. You can see ground contact on the foot. Sometimes you set up, you think it's perfect, and you see them run and they're running on the back of the foot, and you're like, well, that's not right. So it just needs to change your alignment like that. So here we can see it's landing where we want. Stride length's pretty equal, shoulders are equal, and arm swing's equal as well. Heel rise is the one that you can't really adjust the alignment, it's all down to suspension, so it could be your sleeves too thick or chin lines are too high.
Would you ever then, if you felt that a category, what would tell you that you've maybe got the wrong category when you're looking at them there, that your alignments are from? If
your height is, say you start off with 2.5 centimetres longer, and your alignment looks pretty good when they're stood up and they do a bit of a jog and it's okay. What I forgot to mention is always film people at full pelt, because that's when they're putting the most force through. So even though it may seem stiff to start off with, as soon as they start running as fast as they can, you tend to find it's actually more correct than you thought it would be. If it's too soft, often you find that no matter what you do, it's just really flexible. And you see the foot is deflecting a lot, and they're finding not getting much energy return from it, they're just getting a lot of shock absorption, they're not feeling anything coming back to the foot. So it's all down to a bit of patient perception and videotape. But the categories we have now are pretty close, to be honest. We don't often find people born in the wrong category. One thing we did experiment with back in the early days was changing weight and adding weight to the foot. So because they're quite light, sometimes you feel that there's not a lot there, and does it help you swing through, or does it hold you back? And what we found, it doesn't make any difference. So weight doesn't seem to make any difference at all. Whether you add lots or you take lots of weight, people don't seem to find that it changes things much. With attaching spikes as well, the further up the back of the foot is better, just so that if the patient needs to stop, they can, or if they're running or posterior javelin, they have to stop suddenly, they have something to push them. Hello.
Did you take into account any wind resistance? Because when you can actually hear when Oscar's running, you hear the bleed.
Yeah.
So they must. You would think that would. What do you say about turning blowers on?
No, not especially. You can't really judge wind. Wind's a constant variable, so we can't really do anything to
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there must be a sail effect where it's affecting the alignment, because it's making them swing
Yeah, and that's what he finds on running around corners, which is why Oscar finds it really hard to do the 400 metres around corners.
Yeah.
Because when you're running on the curve, the wind resistance is completely different to running straight.
So do you see not too long down the road there's going to be like a a blade with cyclist type helmet arrangement?
Well, we've tried already.
You've tried it?
Yeah, it didn't make a huge amount of difference to him. It made a little bit. I think he felt it was different around the corners, but it didn't really change his time. It was just a feeling rather than the acceleration of time really.
Yeah.
But what we have started doing is making the blades thinner and thicker. So it's naturally narrower but thicker. So it's the same category, plus there's more carbon layers, but it's a thinner blade. So that can change wind resistance as well. So whereas a cheetah is so wide, we tried making it half the width, but then if you make it half the width, you have to make it double the thickness. So you get the same category. We have tried with that, and that's proven quite good. So you might see some of those in the game soon.
Yeah.
Johnny Peacock, Penny mentioned. Johnny started off as a 16-year-old PlayStation addict, who then went to a scouting trial day, I think, down in London, is that right? And he went through it, pretty much did everything, and was spotted as a sprinter. Initially he lost his leg due to meningitis when he was quite young, I think about 4 or 5. And recently, his personal best has changed now since the Paralympic Games. It's now 11.35, which doesn't put him far away from Oscar, which is quite exciting. So it's like the big Oscar-Johnny showdown coming up. So Johnny takes a lot of time to work with because he kind of knows what he likes now. So this is us trialling a different shaped blade with him. So it's just a matter of, once again, at the track. And this is just him doing his warm-up drills that he does with his coach. Once again, trying out different feet. So you can see the amount of deflection you actually get, but if I could slow it down, you can see it better. But this is a trial, just for good for the line of just doing this can tell them a lot. Long jump up. So long jump's quite interesting because you have a long sprint, or as long as you need, which you need to get as much speed up as you can. Then you also have the takeoff and you have the landing as well, and what you do between the takeoff and the landing means how far you go. So you can see here he takes off from his prosthetic foot. Anyone know why that might be?
More energy.
More energy?
Yeah, energy return.
That's what everyone thinks. However, the reason is because for a long jump you want to go forwards and up, and you get a lot more inertia throwing your sound leg forward than you do a very lightweight cargo leg. So normally long jumpers will try both, and they just find that whichever leg they used to take off, that's what they use. And they normally rotate around to see which one's better. More often than not, they find it's better to take off the prosthetic leg and swing their sound leg forward. Steph Reed, someone else to look out for. Sprinter and long jumper. I think she's the world record holder long jumper. So bear her in mind as well. And this is her sprinting. Richard sees her quite a lot. She has a very good running style, this Steph, very fluid. And you can see even arm swing, even shoulder motion as well. So she's very good. And the same thing applies, long jumping, you need a long sprint before you take off. Sizes, there's only one size of this. Same height as well, you just trim it down as you need to. Depending on the length of your socket. Talking about category, so this is what you see in the catalogue. You have weight levels, so 69 to 77 is a category 4. If they weighed 76, you'd get a 4 high. If they weighed 70, you get a 4 low. That's basically the way you do it. If they weighed bang in the middle, you'd probably phone me and I'd bring 2 down and we'd try both. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But other than that, it's quite simple to order which one that you need. Right, so that's cheetahs. So that's cheetah transtibials, which is high active sprinting leg. Next we have flex run, which we now have with a Nike sole. So this is quite a big thing for us and for Nike, I guess you could say. It's not often you find that high-profile sportswear manufacturers get involved in anything Paralympic or disability-wise. So it was quite good for us. So flex run, people have often seen. What you used to do would be get half your trainer, stick it onto the bottom, which is fine. We can still do that if we need to. Obviously, the issue with that is time it takes to bond a trainer, cut it in half. Now they're made by Nike for us. It's easy to change.